So, new general manager Ran Carthon going to speak tomorrow. We're going to go through some transactions that he is directly tied to that have helped make the 49ers such a rousing success from a roster standpoint. Now, obviously, to get the roster in place is one thing. To have the exceptional kind of coaching that the 49ers also have on both the offensive and defensive side of the football. Don't forget, DeMeco Ryans is getting head coaching interviews everywhere. I really do think he's the most popular name that I've heard around the NFL this cycle. I know that Frank Reich was probably up there for some people too, and offense is always going to garner, I think, more attention. But DeMeco Ryans, I think the latest I've seen is that he's interviewing with the Colts as Jim Irsay seeks to live out his further Mike Vrabel fetish by hiring former tough guy players like Jeff Saturday, who blows the biggest lead in the history of the NFL.
I don't know. I think it's just everyone wants in on that San Francisco action.
Oh, sure. But I also think that, Irsay had the opportunity to hire Vrabel in past for
McDaniels.
Josh McDaniels.
Yeah.
And that did not go well. Either way, DeMeco Ryans getting a lot of love from NFL job openings around the league right now. So a lot of people, Ran Carthon he was a player in the early 2000s, went on to work with the St. Louis/LA Rams organization in a scouting capacity and personnel role. Then has been with the 49ers for the better part of 2017, I believe, is when he landed in San Fran, and has been there ever since until, recently as Tuesday, officially becoming the Titans general manager. So now he's interacted with a lot of different people around the league. And I did not go into yesterday's podcast taping with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. The podcast is called The Install. Expecting to ask Greg, or for Greg to really know much about personnel executives that way, because that's not really what he does. He's a X's and O's film breakdown, tape study guy. But Greg, before we started taping, is like, hey, love Ran Carthon. Really worked with him in a couple of combines, liked him a lot, really think highly of the guy. And kind of was going on. I'm like, Greg, can we talk about this on the podcast? He's like, yeah, let's talk about it on the podcast. So here is Greg Cosell of NFL Films analyzing the new Titans GM.
Yeah, and also I'm fortunate enough to know Ran Carthon a little bit, spend a little time with him at the combines over the years. I think what's really interesting is where he's coming from, because he's been part of sort of the Kyle Shanahan group and the John Lynch group out with the 49ers. He's been there since 2017. And so I think when you look at what they do offensively, which I'm sure is the thing that fans of the Titans are thinking about offensively, what is it going to look like going forward? If they think about the Niners, they'd probably say, hey, if we could look like that to some degree, we'd be pretty good. So that's his most recent background, as I said, going back to 2017. And, again, you need people in place, but you always have to start with some kind of philosophy. Obviously, coaches always say, hey, you have to coach to the players you have. You can't force a philosophy, but you have to start with an approach, a philosophy, a methodology. And obviously, he's bringing that with him. That's what he knows well. That's his most recent last, 6 years, 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I'll be very curious to see how he goes about kind of, building the team, because say what you want. The reality is they did lose, 7 in a row or 8 in a row to end the season?
Oh, it's 7 in a row, Greg. Don't put 8 on me.
Right. So, you can say what you want. They've been a good team. There's a lot of solid pieces in place, but as Bill Parcells always used to say, your record is what your record is. So they did lose 7 in a row. So you can try to sugarcoat that any way you want, but, obviously that's not good enough. And I think the offensive coordinator is going to be fascinating. I think that's going to say a lot as to, I don't want to say, look, Ran, from what I know of him, just personality-wise, I've never worked with him, so I can't speak to that. But I don't think he's a my way or the highway, So I'm very curious to see how it works with Mike and Ran in terms of choosing, an OC, because that is a really important position now on this team, how they're going to play going forward.
So that is Greg Cosell, a part of Greg Cosell's analysis yesterday on the podcast. Go check it out. We did a lot of work on the divisional round games for those of you X and O's junkies who want to continue to learn more about these teams participating in the playoffs and how they're going to match up against each other. So Lucas put together a list of transactions that are directly associated with Ran Carthon from the time that he arrived in the role of director of pro personnel through his circumstance where he was the director of player personnel recently before he was hired as the Titans GM.
And this is, like you said, based on what his job description was at the time and what the moves the Niners made in that span, and also straight from 49ers reporters.
Yeah.
Guys that know. David Lombardi of The Athletic, guys that have been around that organization that have listed out these names that basically fall under Carthon's job description in San Fran.
Now, before you read this list, let me again remind people what the role of director of pro personnel is versus the director of player personnel. The director of pro personnel, they report directly to the general manager. They are involved with dealing with players who are already in the league, obviously. The responsibilities include the bulk of contract negotiations with free agents, negotiating contract extensions with current players, scouting the other 31 NFL teams' rosters. Scouting other teams is where things typically get delegated amongst league scouts, advanced scouts, and things of that nature. So the director of pro personnel is very, very heavily involved in the free agency and contract negotiation portion of things. Now to the director of player personnel, they then oversee the director of pro personnel and additionally the college scouting process directly under the general manager. So in San Francisco, it's a three-tiered system because they have John Lynch as the GM, they have Adam Peters as the assistant GM, then Ran Carthon as the third there as the director of player personnel. So having reset all of that, now we understand what the roles are. Let's hear the list.
Can I interest you in 27? Will you grade out the pick for me? Can you do that?
Grade out A through F?
1 through 10, whatever you want to do.
Okay, let's say A through F. I'm dumb.
Can I interest you in 2017 fifth round pick, tight end out of Iowa, George Kittle?
Yes, you may. I would say A+.
Is that a good pick?
That is a good pick. George Kittle, I don't know why I didn't remember George was a fifth-round pick.
Yeah, number 146 overall.
Yeah, that's a solid one.
His last year in college, he only had 314 yards and 4 touchdowns with the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Iowa.
Yeah. Can I interest you in one Trent Taylor, the wide receiver out of Louisiana Tech in the 5th round in 2017?
Trent Taylor actually had, he's had good spurts. Is he still a Niner at present?
I'll double check.
I don't know where Trent Taylor is, but Trent Taylor had a few years. Sure. You can interest me in that.
Trent Taylor currently is a Cincinnati. Oh, he's a Bengal. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
He's had a nice season in Cincinnati.
He did have a nice season.
Former Louisiana Tech wide receiver. Moving on into 2018, and we don't have to go through every pick the 49ers made over the last 5 years, but guys like 5th-round pick DJ Reed in 2018, right? Guys like 5th-round pick Jay Greenlaw in 2019. A fan favorite here, Jawan Jennings in 2020, 7th-round pick out of Tennessee. Elijah Mitchell, 6th round in 2021. Of course, one Brock Purdy, 7th round in 2022, currently starting quarterback in the divisional round. And then in free agency, when you talk about his role as both the director of pro and player personnel, signing cornerback Charvarius Ward off the street, 3 years.
MTSU's own.
$42 million.
Yeah, pretty good.
Obviously, was the Christian McCaffrey move the most important in-season move for any team this year?
Ooh, that's a great question. In-season move. Where else would that – I'm trying to think of what other in-season moves would even come close to Christian McCaffrey. Trade deadline
T.J. Hawkinson was a big deal.
From the Lions to the Vikings was a big deal, and he went crazy in his first game and does fit exactly what they want to do there. So Hawkinson –
the trade deadline wasn't that busy. Like it was T.J. Hawkinson to Minnesota.
But those are still some big names.
Sure, Naheem Hines to Buffalo, where he's made an impact as a return man. But I think McCaffrey, given where the Niners are right now, is the 2 seed in the NFC, and that next level status they've reached with the offense, and McCaffrey being such a massive part of that. His numbers have been insane. I think 12 total touchdowns since he arrived in San Francisco.
So I'm looking at the list here. Like Robbie Anderson, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Hankins for the Cowboys is a big deal, but it's not to that scale. Kadarius Toney with the Chiefs it hasn't really panned out in meaningful ways. Calvin Ridley TBD from the Falcons to the Jaguars. So yeah, I think it's it
has to be McCaffrey.
Yeah, it's McCaffrey. It's not terribly close. Now they gave up a ton.
Mm-hmm.
This year's second and third rounder and fourth rounder plus a 2024 fifth rounder. So like 4 draft picks for a running back on a big deal. That's not something most people would advise in doing.
And the evaluation thing with Christian McCaffrey, it's like, yeah, Christian McCaffrey's a good football player. I guess the only risk you're taking on there is the injury history.
Which is a risk.
Yeah, but it's safe to say that his resume as an evaluator is pretty rock solid, right?
I would agree.
So what's the biggest unknown with Ran Carthon in this new role that he's never had before as a general manager? I mean, is it
everything else?
Yeah, relationships, brokering, trade deals.
No, but now the relationship element of him is very, very well documented. He is somebody who players love, who executives respect, whose work ethic is regarded very, very highly in the league. And the emphasis on the relationship building portion of it is something that is brought up very often. That and something that Ian Rappaport, a nugget that Ian Rappaport had the other day on the NFL Network as far as his personality and his approach to the construction of a football team. This is Ian Rappaport, I believe, yesterday on television.
Yeah, so much of this was about leadership for Ran Carthon, and there's a lot that goes on in the Tennessee Titans building, especially the big personality, I would say demanding personality, of Mike Vrabel, the longtime head coach there, and Ran Carthon is someone who has dealt with big-time personalities before, a Bill Parcells disciple, and really someone who is seen as a bridge builder among all facets, from players to executives to coaches. This is someone who can stand up to the best of them and also do it in a soft, gentle way. Really, really skilled personnel executive. Won out as the finalist over Ian Cunningham from the Chicago Bears and Ryan Cowden, the in-house candidate from the Tennessee Titans. And as far as that leadership goes, was noteworthy that Amy Adams Strunk, the owner, said in this statement announcing this hire that she was impressed with his, quote, natural leadership abilities and ability to connect with people. That, first and foremost, is what Ran Carthon is about.
So all this is well and good until he's on the job, right? And he's on the job officially as of, well, I mean, I guess he's on the job officially as of signing his contract Monday evening. But
no, wasn't it Tuesday? The reporting on the timeline. There was new reporting today on the timeline, right, on when those second-round interviews took place with Carthon.
Tuesday, yes.
Basically, he was offered the job right after the second interview took place.
And it is interesting in also that reporting from, I believe, the NFL Network, that Ian Cunningham, the candidate from the Bears, turned down the Arizona Cardinals.
That was Jay Glazer with that one.
Jay Glazer of Fox. Jay Glazer saying that Ian Cunningham turned down the Cardinals and was still very much interested in the running for the Titans job until they decided that Ran Carthon was their preferred candidate. So unfortunately for Ian Cunningham, he kind of missed out on being an NFL general manager. Now maybe I don't know what the situation is like in Arizona. Maybe their GM just walked away after having significant problems throughout the season. The organization has been in tatters, and Cliff Kingsbury is so fed up with football after spending a couple of years on the Cardinals staff that he bought a one-way ticket to Thailand and said, "Nah, peace, I'm good on your OC offers for the time being." So what don't we know about Ran Carthon? Well, basically everything else that's involved with the general manager.
Being the final say on draft night, right? Actually making these trades, executing the trades.
What his staff is going to look like, because, I mean, one would assume that there would be some changes to the front office personnel now that a new chief executive is coming in. All of that stuff is something that we don't have answers to. He'll be asked questions about philosophical approach and what he thinks about current players on the roster and how he, if the Titans if he can recreate the kind of personnel magic with the Titans that he's had with the Niners, or, you think somebody asked him about trading for Trey Lance? I don't think so.
Oh, you're saying in the presser?
Yeah, I think.
Friday.
Do you think a media person asked him if he's trading for Trey Lance?
If they do, I really hope it's not citing the Instagram post.
Trey Lance, your former quarterback.
What do you think of fingers crossed emoji?
What does the finger crossed emoji mean to you?
What does it mean to you? Yeah, that's it.
It's like one of those Rorschach tests or whatever, where the therapist holds up an image, a blotted image for you to tell you what it is.
Hold it up in the presser.
What does this mean?
What comes to mind when you see this emoji?
God, why is this stuff so stupid? Off season is fun. I understand why fans love it, but it is just exhausting in terms of the different rabbit holes that people try and take themselves down, much less everything else. But it's going to be a fascinating case study because, like you heard from Greg in that clip earlier, sure, if the Titans could be a fraction of what the 49ers are on offense, that'd be swell. That all sounds great. Now, how much conversation is going to be had between Ran and Mike on the OC hire matters because Ran is going to be looking for a particular type of player, as is Vrabel. They're going to need to come to collaboration and consensus on that, and it has to be somebody, the coach that they hire, along with the other coaches that they need to hire to replace guys like Anthony Mitchett and Keith Carter and Eric Frazier. All of those things, when you come down to it, are going to be, once they get on the field, more in control of the coaching staff than they are in the GM. I'm sure John Robinson thought he made plenty of good personnel decisions towards the end, and that certain things happened that didn't allow those things to be maximized, or some were just bad picks. Shout out Des Fitzpatrick. I don't think there's a thing that we have discussed less as an indictment of the former front office construct here than Des Fitzpatrick. And I don't know why that keeps popping into my head as of late, but man, does that guy get off easy as far as how little he's been able to contribute. I mean, he's contributed nothing but contributed to a 4-interception performance by Ryan Tannehill against the Houston Texans when he absolutely had to play. But there is going to be a stylistic kind of marriage here that I'm fascinated about. And the idea that he's not a my way or the highway guy, whatever that means. And Vrabel is very, very, much. Mike is very aggressive and challenging and rightfully so. A very successful coach and player during the course of his time in the league and understands how to identify talent. There's no question about that. So how those two work together is going to be we'll never know the real behind the scenes deal, but that is something that is going to be so interesting to see play out and how it kind of manifests itself in the draft process.
I didn't realize Des Fitzpatrick was a Steeler.
What?
Yeah, that went right. Someone in the chat, AJ in the chat, said Des is a Steeler now. Yeah, the Pittsburgh Steelers signed former Titans wide receiver Des Fitzpatrick. I'm reading this from the Tennessean.
When?
Nick Gray of the Tennessean a week ago. I totally missed this. It was a future contract.
No bleep.
Yeah, Des Fitzpatrick.
Well, I guess the Titans don't have to send. I had no idea that. Well, good luck.
Future contract for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Steelers fans hate their OC, and they kept Matt Canada. That is something that is causing a lot of problems.
A lot of strife in Pittsburgh over that move. It's crazy. Do you remember what they gave up for Des?
To trade up to get him? I know he was a 4th-round draft pick. I can't remember the compensation exactly. Do you have it in front of you?
A 4th, a 5th, and a 7th.
Oh.
It's so crazy, and hindsight's 2020. But
no.
But that was one of those, because we talked about that, right? Like, try to remove hindsight from it. What was the head scratcher in the moment? Des Fitzpatrick, that pick was top 3, right, in the J-Rob era of, in that moment, everybody wondering what in the world was going on.
Do you remember that dude we had? And forgive me, I don't mean to be. I don't mean to be. This was like the first couple of weeks that we had the show because I feel like we started right in the middle of the draft process.
We started in March of 2021.
So, yeah, middle of the draft process before the 2021 draft. Do you remember that dude we had on from the 33rd team? And I asked him specifically about Des Fitzpatrick before they drafted him. And that was the top of the list for the article he had just written on biggest bust potential in the NFL draft. It was Des Fitzpatrick at the top.
Yeah, I remember.
And that was months before they drafted Des Fitzpatrick. And the metrics on that, obviously, that is also easier analysis to do once you have the results in hand. But damn.